Okay, hello, Mike. Happy Thursday.
Hey Jack, happy Thursday to you. Welcome to another episode. I just want to let you know we often talk about what is it like AI, Android, I don't know, robots and stuff. And I started playing a game because I haven't played a game in so long that I really enjoyed as much as this one. And I think I'm way behind the times because it's not a new game,
Hmm.
but it's not super terribly old. It's called Detroit Beyond Human, Become Human. And so the central idea is you play as androids,
Hmm.
and these androids have to figure out how to manage different situations. And so there's this choice mechanic where you go around and choose things, right? And then sooner or later it becomes you have to start to make moral ish decisions, I guess you could call it that. And then you, as some characters, break out of being an android and become a person that wants rights and so on and so forth. And it's sort of interesting because it takes you along, I think, the kind of sci-fi path of, have we created this thing that will somehow have its own desires or something like that. And it's also easier because really well acted, how they, have these digital actors, but these are real actors. And there is a couple famous people in it. So high budget. And then at the end of every chapter, it shows you these paths, which I think is a really great motivator because it shows you all the paths you didn't take, and these are
Hmm.
all just labeled as not taken. You don't know what they are, but you see the one you did take. And I think this idea of a branching path might be a fun topic for this week. Um, and the reason why is, we talked a little bit about creativity, but someone was talking about art or someone making art. I think it was that. And they're like, making art is thousands of decisions. And I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, it is, right? You're like, you have to, should I do this? Should I do that? And I'm not saying just painting or doing anything, but let's say you're doing any kind of work that we'd call creative. It usually is that you could go this way or that way. That seems fair, right? Or what do you think? Am I even on a topic of interest?
Yeah, definitely. There's so many areas we can go into. I think that the gaming field, in the context of the generative AI, that would be an interesting combination. So I think the game developers, and the game that you are describing sounds very interesting. Um, but they were struggling, right? Because there was the design issue, right? Everybody knew in the field that there is about 10% of chance that the game will be a commercial success, right?
Mm.
Which means that 90% of the projects were kind of problematic, right? And that's why there were so many sequels and kind of maybe a lack of creativity to a certain extent, because trying a new idea meant that, well, as much as as great as it may have been sounding, maybe the market was thinking a different, uh, had a different perception, right? So what you are describing, right, it's kind of like, maybe the audience, there's an issue of an audience, right? We may be interested in different things, and but the kind of the cash cow problem still exists, right? The main objective of a game is to kind of not to bankrupt the developer, right? Right.
It's a great
uh,
point. Yeah, I actually didn't think of it that way. I always think of well, maybe that's that creative thing. I always think there's some out creative outcome, right? Some story you want to tell, and we could talk about movies or anything else, right? And then there's just the hard part of realization, which is time, budget, talent,
yeah,
all the constraints.
yeah, but the gaming field was very fascinating, right? For the demographic, like young people, right? When we were in the academia, actively involved, we've been profiling the network traffic, and it was, like a few decades back, 40% of the network traffic was World of Warcraft, right? 10% and
Mm.
20% was, Minecraft. right? Then the rest was probably Facebook, and then maybe 5% was the academic stuff, right? And that was remarkable, right? And I kind of keep thinking that, hey, what if World of Warcraft was not a massively multiplayer thing, but it was more kind of like a human to AI kind of a deal, right? And maybe that's kind of something that is going to be coming, right? Like maybe people are still playing World of Warcraft, but maybe something as commercially successful as that particular game from Blizzard. Maybe the next thing will be something that, hey, it's going to be maybe multiplayer, but with a very active AI participation.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, not only in the
Well,
design
well,
phase, right?
well, you make me think of something I think is interesting about gaming. Well, there's a few real key concepts. I always think of saving your game as a certainly really interesting thing that doesn't happen in real life. It's that thing that you can fail quickly, which is kind of a big theme, right? You can fail and then you just go back to your saved game, right? Like it's the no consequences part. But I was just working on my course, and because a university level course requires or says that you need 10 to 12 hours a week of work to do in a course in order to proceed with this. And that number I found stunning because I don't think that that isn't what I require. I just find that's what people have a hard time putting in to a course, right? Time management. But, and why is this interesting? Gaming tells you how much time you've spent in the game. And I'm thinking for many games, spending 10 to 12 hours a week in a game is extremely typical, right? And that's where it's funny is like, could I make my course like so compelling that you'd want to spend 10 to 12 hours a week, like a game?
Mm.
Am I getting anywhere with this weird? Sorry, this is what you
Yeah,
made me think of is like it tracks your engagement and sometimes not gamifies it, but you know what I mean. It sucks your attention that you must spend time or lose your status, your whatever. But I do like it being more positive that it's like fun. I'm doing something that's fun, and 10 to 12 hours a week of doing fun things for our last discussion, right, is great. We have plenty of time, sort of, right? We do
yeah.
definitely spend it in passive ways, but why not active ways? Like gaming is also a great way because it can be educational. I don't know, too much as usual to break off.
Yeah, so I don't want to dive too much into the educational field, right? But the kind of like the specification of time, how much do you need to invest to progress in the course? That was always a very threatening number, for students. And I think that might be coming a little bit as a kind of like a habit, maybe from high school where maybe there is very little homework, right? And kind of saying, oh, do I have to do something beyond the classroom is kind of like extremely unusual, right? And then you have a big number, right? Like, oh, maybe for every hour of a lecture, you need to study 2 hours, or maybe per week, you need to have 10 hours of studies. That is a number that is, like out of this world for a lot of students nowadays. And
Hmm.
but then I was teaching gaming for a while, and I had a very specific audience in that particular class, and we have been always doing show of hands, right? How many hours do you play a day, right? How many hours? Show of hands, please. 1 hour. All the hands up, right? 2 hours, all hands up. I go to 5 or 6 hours, still I have all the hands up, right? And then then they start kind of going down, maybe around 7 or 8, right? And but you see, kind of like gaming is a kind of like a different beast, and I always was thinking that if we could kind of capture that attraction and channel it into something that is educational, right? Like really very clearly positive. I mean, I'm not saying that games are not positive, right? They might be, right? but still, if we could channel that energy into something else, that would be like a groundbreaking invention.
Well, and I think that, is the window we've opened, you and I, in AI, because let's go back to the branching paths, right? To develop gaming structures, you have to have goals, you have to have methods that you use, right? And then you sort of have to see progress. So all these are very understandable, right? In terms of measures, whether it's also in work, like I guess we could say, to be cynical, that your work, you should just have the same amount of output consistent forever, right? Like that could be the whole goal, So there is no mastery and there is no improvement, but I don't think that's necessarily true, right? Like perhaps there's going to be fluctuations. The reason why you can never be consistent in your job is because there's always going to be unforeseen fluctuations or something. That's fine, right? But your abilities don't change over time. Whereas with gaming, I just think that you're always using fairly understood motivational tools to keep people engaged. And when you see these 100, 200-hour games, yeah, it's interesting because that's a design choice, and hard to design, because certainly this game I'm talking about, like, it's not random. This was designed very consciously. All the scenes were acted, even though you might have three choices, right? One choice led to them doing this act or whatever. And the branching was revealed to me, I think, when I was about 14 years old, because I was so enamored with Zork, the game. But I had someone, and back in the day, I don't know how people did this because it was compiled. They gave me the source code and printed out on remember big old printers that had these massive dot matrix printers, so I had this massive printout of all the source code for Zork, and it was just fascinating to me because I got to see all the paths I never explored and all the things the person wrote in those scenarios. You see what I mean? Because it's an open parser. It just means you can type any words you want. So think of how many possible things would happen. Well, most of the time it said, I don't understand, or something cute. You see what I mean? Like most of them were, but if you came up with something really interesting, and this is another thing people love about games, right, are these Easter eggs. It's the, hey, if you knew that if you were in this spot and you did up, 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 down, down, you see what I mean? Like these sort of things, well, how did people find those out? And now games, by the way, rely upon something extremely hard to do, so that gamers come together to try massive amount of experimentation to see if there's something that exists for bragging points. And I keep wishing, God, I wish education was like this. Right? Or somehow that we could inspire the same kind of, and maybe we do, right? I mean, maybe you had a great teacher that, I might have told this story, but it's one of those stories where the guy's lecturing, he was in math class, and the teacher said, come after class, I want to see you. And he's really nervous, like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And he goes to see the professor, and he thinks he's going to get in trouble or whatever. And the professor says, you're a little too good at this math. What you need to do is look at what real math is. This is just basic math. It's not that interesting that we're teaching here. But here's these two books that teach you what really math is all about. And of course, he's giving this lecture because he is the dean of the School of Mathematics at Oxford now. And I keep thinking, like, oh man, how come nobody ever gave us the book? You know what I mean? Or whatever, right? Like, is that all it takes? Is to be introduced to something? I don't know. It's a lot, but I still am inspired by it, I guess is my point, right? And I still think with AI, maybe you have a partner that can help you with the complexities of choosing your own adventure.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of a copilot is exactly that, right? I mean, you perhaps want to do programming, but the copilot on the side will kind of do the mundane programming, right? And you're just gonna focus on the structure, right? Or there's going to be very soon, or if not already, copilots for the Microsoft Office application, where you're probably gonna tell the copilot, hey, you want to do some calculation in Excel, and it will do it for you, right? So the same concept will be translated into gaming, right? There is gonna be perhaps uh, a copilot that is gonna have embodiment, right? Maybe it's gonna be your team player, right? Like a teammate that is going to maybe show you the way, or maybe provide some cover, or kind of take over a little bit if there is a branching, right, and there's like an unexplored area that you should go to, right? So that those kind of things will happen. But the way I see gaming right now is that the scenarios are really very narrowly defined domain, right? It's
Yeah.
basically kind of combat related, some sort of an exploration. Maybe there is maybe something that is kind of competitive, like there's a team that is kind of combating another team, but still kind of the main axis is a kind of militaristic conflict, right? That is resolved with kind of like special forces, kind of like an operation, right? So you are kind of an operator, and and that's tremendously attractive, right? Especially for boys, right? And and I was like that too, right? I Doom or Quake or those
Right.
early first-person shooters were extremely attractive kind of proposition for when I was, let's say, 20 years old, right? So. Um, but there is really not too much that we can kind of like invent beyond, right? Like there were certain games that resonated for decades, right? Let's say that was the Diablo game, right? Or maybe there was, like I said, maybe World of Warcraft, like open world or massively multiplayer games. But if we want to pick those design patterns, then there's gonna be maybe like handful only, and they all kind of have kind of like very close. They might be open worlds, but they are kind of like very close domains. And maybe AI can help a little bit with that, because maybe we can do some. I mean, there was something different, right? For a while, there was this game Second Life, right? They wanted
Yeah.
to be the Amazon of that time, right? Like you would learn, you would go to classes within Second Life. You would do the merchandising, the purchases, the B2C, B2B kind of a deal. Then they kind of faded because maybe the platform was not robust enough. So there was a few attempts to kind of do a few more, but I don't know if right now we are seeing anything like that. I mean, I kind of doubt that.
I think it's still around actually, and didn't I think a lot of the investment Facebook did was in that sort of virtual world because they have a headset and these are all to me interesting. They always try toward a certain freedom, and that freedom often leads to uh, severe disappointment because without, like you said, a certain I I guess you would call it a very mechanical goal, like shooters or something, right? That the goal is pretty easy to understand, um, and easy to kind of, hey, if I had a bigger gun or whatever, right? Like the problems are not hard to solve, but the problems of engaging with others or being creative with others are hard to solve,
Yeah.
which kind of leads me back to the design of this game. Is again, nothing's random. Everything had to be planned, everything had to be shot, everything had to be thought through, even though the playing of it feels open, right? It feels, hey, I've got a choice. I could do A, B, or C, you know, or something like that, right? I can do, it's not a fighting game per se, a little bit, but you know, minor. It's a decision game. And that's why I think it's intriguing to play, because the decisions are interesting, you know, and they have consequences for your character and the character in the world. And I tried that when AI first came out. I'm like, develop a text adventure around a Wes Anderson movie or something, you know, and I'm like, and it did, you know, it's like, here you are, you're in Wes Anderson land and you can do this, or you can do whatever you want to do. And I said this for a while, and we talk often about like, well, how do you develop the rules? And this is where AI currently falters, right? It doesn't need any rules, it makes them up as it goes along. So how do you and maybe this is a good topic when we come to NPC, MPC, am I getting it right?
And non-player character.
And no, the new AI architecture.
Oh, MCP, yeah, MCP.
MCP,
yeah.
Okay. Too many. But, you know, can you architect goals, stages? You see what I mean? Can you do some of the major architecture and let the player and the AI fill in the rest, right? That was my thought, is can you have sort of a control mechanism in a sense? Because like you mentioned before, when you're using Copilot, it doesn't know the big picture, right? It's sort of more of an order taker. And when I use AI, I like it because it'll just be like a grad student or something. Like, here's some really hard thing, go do this, right? I don't want to do it. I just want to see if it's worth doing, is usually half my goal, right? Like, is this interesting at all? I don't know, but I don't want to do the work. You do it. Oh, okay, it's not that interesting, discard. Right? Whereas when you're playing a game, you know, you do need to have story structures and I don't know. Any thoughts? Like, it definitely needs a human touch, is what I'm getting at. I think to be, or you just have a mechanic, right? The mechanic is waste as much time of this person as possible, which could be the model right now that they've brought into most AIs, right? Be super complimentary, keep people on the side as long as possible, try to upsell. Sure, why not, right? Until they can get advertisements in there, what else are they going to do?
Yeah.
That's pretty cynical, but it's true, right? Like, unless you can monetize something, and I think monetization's got to come from structure.
Yeah, might be. I'm not sure. I mean, this is such a nuanced kind of problem. I remember, you know, maybe to kind of illustrate this a little bit. I remember when the game Gears of War came to the market. It became very popular, but it was really kind of a very direct extension of the prior, you know, kind of combat, you know, first-person shooter games, except maybe for one thing. Yes, there was a little bit of graphics kind of differences. You know, it was very good visual, but it was not revolutionary. The thing that they changed was that during the gameplay, you really had to use the cover, right? The kind of like maybe the barrel or some sort of a kind of like a natural, you know, bullet stopping, you know, environment, so that you could kind of progress, right? So there was a lot of kind of combat where you are hiding behind something and you are kind of like aiming from behind. It's not a huge design change comparing to, let's say, other, you know, similar games that were on the market, right? But that kind of what probably made the game, right? So there was, so if we are looking about such a small design change, you know, that kind of like promotes a new product and makes it successful, maybe, as opposed to kind of fading into kind of like a, you know, a range of other existing, you know, games that are very, very similar to each other, right? It's a kind of difficult thing to do, right? Because what do you do next, right? Like, okay, so I found a feature that really resonated with the audience. what else can I find? And maybe it's just going to be one feature that I'm going to add that is going to be the next step, right? The next successful product, right? Or maybe that feature is going to not going to be accepted because maybe it's going to slow down the play, right? Maybe it's going to be kind of awkward or whatever, right? So it's a very difficult thing to do. And yeah, and then if we are talking about the underlying AIs, let's say we have underlying AI that will be the plane of the competition, right, between our product and somebody else's, right? How do we orchestrate, right, this point that you are making about the architecture, right? Like how is the MCP configured, right? I mean, perhaps you will have AIs that will kind of do what we do right now, which is kind of like a round table discussion, right? You say something and then the other person reflects, right? So maybe that's kind of like one MCP architecture, right? Like we are kind of progressing through the topic with with our contributions, right? And whatever I say, it's a context for your further enrichment, right? And then I kind of do the same, right? So this is kind of like a round table kind of situation, right? As opposed to maybe AIs can be configured that they kind of work in parallel, right? So there is like in parallel multiple AIs munching on the problem or contributing something, and then there is going to be like one node or another AI that's going to summarize or kind of create this final composite, that is going to be maybe the next step in the strategy, right, or the next kind of challenge, or the next design of the level, or however we want to see this. So yeah, this could be a fun, fascinating kind of time for not only for games, right, but other applications. We often talk about enterprise applications, like, hey, and maybe a better management, would be useful, right? Or maybe kind of the mundane tasks can be kind of handled with AIs, and perhaps those AIs can be conversational, right? Maybe multiple of them will be kind of debating, right? So your email system might be debating with itself about how to answer an email in the most useful way, or propose another kind of like a step in the marketing campaign, or whatever is needed, right? So yeah, this is kind of an exciting domain.
You bring up so many good points, and I'm in total agreement, right? There's this feeling of like, well, that's interesting, and that's interesting, and if we look at the underlying game of it, which might just be that gaming is choosing a path, right? And I'm personally not struggling, but I'm trying to deliver from a architecture business standpoint of how much of our decisions are based on lagging indicators rather than leading indicators, right? Kind of fun, right? Because if you're trying to make a decision based on what happened before, it's already, you're kind of losing the game, I think, right? Because how do you know whatever happened before was real or unusual? And you reminded me of a game I really enjoyed that did use AI. It was also extremely idiosyncratic, but the game was called The Last Guardian, and you play a little boy with very limited skills or abilities, right? You're just a little kid. And in this game is this massive creature, strong, but yet, let's call it, it doesn't have any agenda per se. Your job isn't to control this creature, it's to kind of hint at this creature as to what you can do together. Because whatever you do does not control it, but it influences it, let's just say. And the fun of the game is, what your goal is, but you have to get the creature to do it or to understand it or whatever. Like you're kind of controlling an AI, but you can't tell it what to do. And I think that might be kind of where you're headed too, is that I think we can have these choices But if you're in control, you actually should start to see that you can only influence. You need to let the AI do more, right? Or let like the engine to sort of do more, and you can nudge it, so to speak. And can you, if the AI is there, say, looking at all of your customer interactions or something ridiculous, right? That happens all the time. Like, I want to nudge this. I want to see if I can get this to go over here. And you try something and it'll kind of push up against you. This is where I don't think the syncopancy prompt is ultimately the best one, right? It has to kind of push back. No, no, I'm busy. Says no AI ever, right? But once you have to kind of negotiate with it and its interpretations, I think that becomes game-like, right? Because then you need to know, you need to spend time with it. You need to understand, and I think this is real, right? That things are not always predictable. Weather changes. Well, and guess that's our point, right? Is everything's unpredictable. But you can start to see things in hindsight, but you can't predict the future. But can you nudge the future? Yeah, I'm doing more push-ups lately. You know what I mean? I'm nudging the future. I don't, I'm not going to be buff anytime soon, but I just know that it's better than nothing. And I think in our efforts, like you said, if you're nudging code, which I don't think is the case, right? I think it's just a doer. You know what I mean? I think it's great, but it definitely is not an active participant. Does this make any sense? Like, that's why games are fun. They're challenging, right? If you don't engage fully, you're dead, game over, start from saved game.
Yeah, the concept that you're describing actually works very well with the current AI architectures, because let's say we transition this into, let's say, an email writing AI, right? The overall goal of the AI system might be to write a polite email, right? But you are furious with someone, right? And you really want to kind of write something very inflammatory, right? So there is this system prompt with the AI that is forcing it to make it very polite, right? But you will be nudging the AI to kind of really kind of like drive the screws in, right? So what's going to come out is perhaps something that is going to be maybe kind of halfway there, right? So it's still going to be polite, but the AI is going to kind of be very sarcastic maybe, or something like that. So that concept of human providing information that becomes context for the AI, but the AI internally has its own quote unquote system prompt that has its own objective. That actually is something that works very well with the current systems, right? And it has many applications like AI safety, right? We can prevent AIs from saying something that is unsafe. Maybe it's kind of like really kind of regulatory, issues, or governance issues that need to be handled that way. So in a game, maybe you have a lot more latitude, but maybe maybe that's not true, because the game will have its own design constraints that may be much far more elaborate than like internal corporate procedures and HR kind of like regulations or whatever. So yeah, that's something that perhaps is very doable nowadays.
It's exciting, and I don't want to use this word game too lightly. What I think of games is that they have goals, right? They have some sort of rules, let's call it, right? Like there's some engagement concepts, and to reach goals and then to build upon those goals would be considered like that's it. Like you want to, most games start out where you are, like in the game I just described, you're fairly weak and pitiful. At the end of the game, you just have a little bit better idea of how to communicate to this AI creature. So you see progress. There's a game I think I've mentioned many times, but it's called The Witness. And The Witness is exciting only because it's completely designed down to every pixel. Like there's literally nothing random about it, but your goal is to figure out what's going on. And you do that through changing what I consider to be your perception. So it's always there, it's always in front of you, but you just don't see it, is the point of this game. And the game teaches you how to see things. And to me, that's the progress you make, because you can, in a sense, complete the game in the first couple of seconds if you knew how to do it. Does that make sense? I like those sort of games because, and of course the problem being is you can't replay them, and that's what, they don't have you don't spend 100 hours. Well, maybe you do spend 100 hours, but you don't do it like in something campaign. I don't know. I guess whatever your students were playing, they played 7 hours a day. Boy, that's a good time commitment right there, right?
Yeah, but that was probably not their perception, right? That was kind of like their everyday life, and yeah, but yeah, I think that there might be an interesting situation now with the kids. When the next wave of PlayStation, like PlayStation 6 comes out, maybe Xbox, if they gonna kind of continue, those systems might have AI chips in them, right? And that will be kind of dedicated neural network, high efficiency kind of, microprocessors or GPUs or whatever. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing what happens with the gaming industry. It seems that maybe the virtual reality is still not ready yet. I think people are not using those for gaming in kind of large numbers, maybe except for some specialized niche areas. So yeah, I think we might be close to the revolution created by the fact that now we have systems that we can talk to, right? Systems that can perhaps generate video on demand, or the cutscene. I mean, just imagine having a cutscene generated, after you finish a level based on how you played or what you played or what your strategy is. That could be a huge point of attraction, right? Having some sort of a basically product on demand, right? I mean, hey, here's the cutscene that is reflecting what you did in the game. That would be huge.
Well, and you bring up another great point, which is because everyone is clever, right? There's so many clever people. The design versus the random, is that a good way to put it? I mean, design versus a generated, let's put it, is that a good? Okay. The design world is like you said, that you send me an email and I send you a response, and you know what I mean? This is a designed the way we can communicate. It used to be you probably remember the day where we all had to have office phones, and we had to pick up the phone to communicate with people in a business environment. I kept thinking I was always in tech, and it was funny that they always gave me a card with my phone number, and I'm like, why would you ever call me when you could just email me, right? Or whatever, like and that's what happened, right? That the email conversation took over from the phone. Even though the phone has lots of advantages, tone, what situation is it? How complex is it, right? I also see now texting, right? Because emails are terrible, even I'm like, hey, just text me and we'll FaceTime. I said this to my students for the first time. I'm like, I don't want to set up a Zoom meeting. Sorry, Jack. I love a Zoom meeting with you, but you know what I mean? Like, no, when you get a minute, text me and I'll let you know if I'm free. Does this make like it's a different way that we manage to change some paradigms. And like you said, 3D or faster processors I don't know if they'll ever change games. You know, games tend to be based on, you know, spectacle. Like, are we ever not going to have $100 million, $200 million movie spectacles? I don't know. They don't seem great, I guess, but we still do them because that's kind of a model. As I said, I'm kind of more the homegrown guy, right? Like you start small, you iterate, and then maybe you learn something. And I think AI obviously makes that possible since it's in a sense free, right? And people are iterating. I've always had those conversations like you mentioned, right? Like it's context, change the context, update the context, you know what I mean, over and over and over again until have we reached something that's interesting. Because I also asked the AI once, like, here's a topic, create two characters with these things and have them debate the topic. And it's fine at that, right? Like it doesn't have any stake in the game, right? But to me, oh, I like a debate, right? I like the back and forth. I'm used to that. Many people aren't, right? That's not how they parse. They're like, just give me the facts, or you know, give me your point of view, and if I like you, I will accept you, and if I don't, I will reject you, or whatever people do, right? They're much less. There's just so much more out there that isn't debatable. You know, it is just like point of view one, point of view two, point of view three. See what I mean? And you just keep taking it in. Just like you're a code writer in Microsoft, like, hey, write me my end of year assessment. You know, it'll be fine. It'll do it fine, but then do you even read it? Right. And I think that was one of the new things where, hey, what's the argument to win this Supreme Court case or whatever? AI wrote it and they never read it until somebody's like, well, I had this happen just this morning, a very, very good AI, right? Not a generative model, but one that's supposed to be more factual, talked about the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. So I was like, wait a second, he's the minority leader, right? Like, you know, and I had to check it, and it's like, yeah, and I wrote that, and it's like, yeah, it's the minority leader. Like, it didn't say, oops, I meant majority. You to see what it's a small mistake, but it's not a mistake. It's just, it's maybe I'm again too much there. But do you think that could be used easily as a clickbait? AI is wrong. You know,
Well,
and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah. You would say it's indifference, right? Like, you know, the majority versus minority. You know, to the AI, it's just a token, right? It doesn't have any attachment. I would say that it's just an algorithmic issue, right? Because you can make the AI to actually appreciate the gravity of that error, right? You can actually have that, you know, and because it's kind of like in the political world, you know, that might be a pretty big issue, right? It's kind of like,
oh, it's
you know,
night and
very
day for
significant.
quite
Yeah,
really.
exactly. Yeah. So that error can be handled, right? Because there's very easy actually ways to kind of do that, but ineffective. But yeah, I was kind of wondering maybe what we're gonna see is kind of like the emergence of something new, something that, you know, maybe Neil Stevenson or William Gibson, you know, are kind of describing in their novels, which are dedicated to kind of maybe not explicitly AIs, and maybe William Gibson a lot more than Neil Stevenson, but you know, the AI in William Gibson's novels like Peripheral, for example, you know, it's kind of in there, right? And the ecosystem, the gaming ecosystem, is really kind of like no different from the corporate world. You play games in order to make money, right? And you kind of have your skills kind of applied in that world. Uh, and maybe it's kind of a combat situation, or maybe it's kind of some sort of a economic game, which is, you know, kind of an interesting business idea maybe for today, right? Like, can we write a game where people will engage as vigorously as my as my students, but they would actually kind of do build something or create something, or even virtually, right? Create value that will be actually a source of income. I mean, that could be something that is coming soon too.
I think there's already evidence because I know in my past, being a Daniel Kahneman fan, and there's also another book called Super Forecasting, which was about how do you tell the future. And, it's our favorite guy, Bayes again, right? It's all about confidence and how do you update your model in order to understand and be more predictively accurate. And now they just do it as a betting model. So now I guess there's plenty of platforms, I don't know what they're called, but they're all predictive betting platforms as to anything that could happen. Now, the question is a business model, is this a game for fun? Sure, I guess, because gaming is its own topic. We might do another week, or maybe we'll never do it because betting is weird. but I think it underlies, like you said, the economic truth of these games. And if they are games, is that I'm even doing this with my own personal addiction to putting too many market bets and doing option trading. I've started to realize like I'm just gaming. I think I'm doing something else, but really I'm kind of just gaming, like, oh, I'm gonna buy this because there's such a good, you see what I mean? Like I'm storytelling and gaming when really underlying it is just the sheer mechanics of an engine. This engine's gonna work in this particular way. You can win only one way, but we love to think that we can trick it because, hey, I've made millions by betting on this, and that's it. This is the narrative part of gaming, right? Is who are you as a player? Are you a novice? How they start. I really like nowadays. Yeah, they start out the games like, who are you? Like, I just want to play for fun. Oh, I am a hardcore, like you have hardnesses built into the game, which I think is even more amazing because architecturally it means, okay, all that's happening is a bunch of numbers. That's all this game is. And you're just going to put weights on certain numbers or take them away, right? So they're all dials, actually, is a better version, you know? And depending on your own goal or whatever, all the dials will change, but you won't change. You will just find it harder because these, and same thing with speed running, I think is another fun gaming concept, right? Like, how fast can I complete this game? Even though the designers intend for me to spend hours or, whatever, hundreds of hours, I beat it in 30 minutes. And everybody is amazed. So it's back to that idea of like every gamer also sort of has a exploitable quality that I wish, again, was more productive. That's all. Like, it seems like, yeah, we've invented this thing that is really exciting and consuming, but we really haven't figured out the engine to make it serve others, build better societies, you know what I mean? Create even more things in the real world, which is nice, and unlike Second Life, right? Like, do we want to build a better world for real, or does all that become ungame like? The minute I walk out the door, the game ends. Anything can happen, but I'm not an influencer anymore. I'm just a NPC. Metaphorically, right? Like, like I don't influence my community that much. I wish, but but that's the thing, but here I'm now like a actual active proxy for something. And again, this is the plot of Snow Crash, right? Are you actually changing the world, or are you just some sort of like avatar with good stats? Well, in the real world, he becomes, that was the thing, is could he do anything heroic in the real world, or and I don't think the hero protagonist is the hero. Anyway, he's not even really the hero of this book. But anyway, but that's the humor, right? Is, hey, you know, this is the fun of reading, or being given a story to follow about these things versus building your own story. And I think people like to build their own stories. But, you know, the rules of the game are that we can help you build your own story. I'm doing that with my course, hopefully, right? I want you to build the story. I'm just trying to come up with the rules.
Yeah, and that's kind of maybe that's the most important thing, right? The story or the connection, right? Maybe the story is there, right? Maybe you don't need to build it necessarily, but you feel a strong connection, right? That's why I was so interested in the X-wing, you know, like Star Wars games, right? Because I wanted fly those TIE fighters and X-wings, right? So the connection was, the story was something that I loved, and the connection was very strong, right? So yeah, so I didn't have to be George Lucas necessarily to kind of create anything beyond whatever existed. But if I could, right, that's the problem with Hollywood maybe nowadays, right? The stories are so shallow, so predictable, so it's kind of thinking that, oh, you know, if only they did something differently, if only, you know, the main character did something that you know would be, you know, different, right? And then so you are trying to build in your mind maybe you know, that's the whole thing, let's say with the, you know, with the Alien, you know, sequels, right? They, you know, the initial movies were so great, and then the next one after the next one, you know, were kind of shallower and shallower, and you kind of thinking, oh, you know, if only they explored that avenue or something else. So you're kind of in your mind, you are kind of building a different movie, right? And kind of like when you are analyzing what you are seeing on the screen, and maybe that's definitely was not their intention, but you know, perhaps with you know with the multimodal models that can generate video, why not generate gaming scenarios, right? Since the graphical engines exist, you know, most of the games kind of are using a handful of basically those engines that display stuff on screen. So the only thing that you need to do is to kind of configure everything so that you see whatever you intended to see, right? So
No, great, and a great ending. And you took me back to, I think, my first viewing of Star Wars, when he sits in his little chair and there's a little graphical thing of him and kind of moving around and shooting things. And I thought, God, that I would play that game, which was basically made of like a square of some lights. That was so exciting to see. And it's hilarious now that we have more fidelity than ever, but it doesn't capture, you know, the fun of like, oh, if you could just move around in 3D space and shoot asteroids, because or something. And I guess later asteroids came out, but whatever, you know, even then it was like this feeling like that's the future. And I guess it was, because asteroids, remember asteroids when you're bouncing around? Anyway, but that was so unbelievably exciting then, because it was still a fun game. I guess that's a good ending point, right? Like if the game's fun, it doesn't really matter.
and we just defined as well as we possibly could that you and I, we are just ultimate nerds, and perhaps you know, and perhaps everything that we are talking about has absolutely no translation to anything real, but still,
Works for
I think,
me. Hey,
yeah.
you know, for us and anyone watching, if you watched this far and you're a nerd too, or oh, I don't know. I'm always thinking, just because Elon's our only viewer, right? I mean, that at least gives us some
Yeah,
influence, Jack. Yeah, right?
yeah. I mean, your friend, I'm sure, is gonna give us the thumbs up. Yeah, I think.
Absolutely, and hopefully a few billion to continue our adventures together.
Yeah.
It's chump change. Anyway, appreciate you, Jack. See you next week.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. See you next week.